All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
The day is 16th of July, 1969. Saturn V, the first rocket to carry a manned mission to the moon, leaves the Kennedy Space Center at 9:32 local time. 5 days later, the entire world holds its breath as Neil Armstrong becomes the first human to set foot on the moon. The world is celebrating. People who made this great achievement possible will always be remembered. Among them is the chief architect of the Apollo Saturn V rocket, Wernher von Braun. To most, he's NASA's rocket genius. But for the few out there, he's a villain. A person behind the project that could have ended the world if the Nazis weren't stopped. Wernher von Braun's story begins some half a century earlier, in interwar Germany. Although born into an old Prussian family, Wernher's far from the typical aristocrat's son. Instead of diligently studying for school, he spends hours observing the stars.
When I grow up, I will go to the moon.
At just 15, he builds a rocket-powered car, a project that leaves his mother, Emmy, speechless.
He's like a sponge, absorbing every scrap of knowledge.
But his father, Magnus Baron von Braun, is far less impressed. A towering figure in young Wernher's life, Magnus sees his son's struggle with school as a flaw, a disgrace to the family's tradition. To him, Wernher's fascination with space and rockets is merely a childish distraction. Yet Wernher's curiosity refuses to be silenced. When he discovers Hermann Oberth's The Rocket to Planetary Spaces, a spark ignites. The book reveals a world where space isn't a mere fantasy, but something that could, one day, be reached. But such knowledge doesn't come without struggle. His first challenge? Math. His school nightmare. It's baffling and he doesn't like it, but it stands between him and the stars. He either has to master the numbers or watch his dreams fizzle. And so, also determined to prove his father wrong, Wernher devours his studies, climbing from an average student to the top of his class.
I was appalled by the fact that it was filled with mathematical equations, and at that time, neither math nor physics were exactly my strengths at school, so I went to my math teacher and asked him what I could do to understand this book, because I really wanted to understand whether it was possible to build such rockets.
Before he even turns 18, he's already publishing academic papers on rockets. But fictional stories fascinate him too. In his school journal, we find a story titled Lunetta, following two explorers who journeyed to a space station, witnessed the marvels of space travel. But there, they uncover a system designed to monitor Earth and its inhabitants. The story hints at a worldview where technology serves as a tool of control, with space reserved as a dominion for the privileged. And who is the author of this story? Of course, Wernher himself, who, amid his progressive dreams of discovery, conceals a dystopian view of the human future. Here we might glimpse at the deep influence of his conservative father, the figure he has always tried to impress. But at what cost? Soon, Wernher will have to choose between the romanticism of his dreams and the harsh reality of a dark adult world. And that time approaches faster than he thinks. In 1930, at the age of 18, von Braun attends the Technical University of Berlin. It's a period of deep crisis for Germany, maybe the worst of its modern history. The 1929 economic crash extinguishes the dreams of the 20s, and as the Nazis begin to rise, all hopes for a prosperous future seem to vanish. But not for von Braun. His obsession with space travel somehow thrives, even as everything else crumbles around him. His ascent, of course, raises questions. Von Braun's first major step comes that same year, where he joins the Society for Space Travel, a German rocket society dedicated to advancing space exploration. At first, the connection seems innocent, even logical. As he later explained,
rocket propulsion and the idea of space flight are the real reason why I decided to study engineering in the first place.
I suppose we can safely believe him on that. The Society's early projects show promise. They include, for example, the promotion of the film The Woman in the Moon, depicting the future of space travel decades before it becomes reality. The film's promotion even features an attempted rocket launch to excite the public. It fails, but if anyone knows how to fix it, it's von Braun. In this obscure time, his talent starts to shine. But there's a problem. Money. Amid the worst financial crisis the world has ever seen, who cares about funding rockets and space travel? So, a few members of the society come up with a bold idea, and in January 1930, they approach none other than Adolf Hitler, at the time seen as a visionary, though somewhat eccentric politician. Although the Nazis are not yet particularly powerful and cannot help, a seed of collaboration's planted. Whether von Braun knew it at that point, we can't be sure, but he will have the time very soon to get acquainted with the idea. The problem of funding is finally resolved later that year, and the solution will perhaps not surprise the more suspicious among you. It's the military. At that time, the German army was bound by the Treaty of Versailles, imposed after its defeat in World War I in 1918. The treaty placed strict limits on Germany's military capabilities, especially on new technologies like tanks and airplanes. But rockets? Rockets weren't even a thing back then. And here's the loophole. When the society contacts the German army requesting funding, the generals immediately see the opportunity. If they could cloak rocket research under the guise of scientific exploration, no one can accuse them of violating the treaty. But of course, they also know that if they can attach some explosives to those rockets, well, you all know what happens next. And if you know it, von Braun knew it better. Soon, the army recruits von Braun for classified rocket research at their base in Kummensdorf, just outside Berlin. Despite early setbacks and deadly accidents, their efforts eventually succeed. By December 1933, they launched their first rocket, marking a turning point to rocket development and von Braun's career. By this time, Hitler has seized power, and the link between rocket research and the Nazi regime is re-established. With Hitler's backing, funding for von Braun's project skyrockets. Just 2 months later, in November, von Braun makes a strange decision that brings him even closer to the Nazis. He joins the Riding Club of the SS, the notorious Nazi bodyguard organization that would later become deeply involved in orchestrating the unimaginable genocide that claims the lives of millions, the Holocaust. Was his connection with this murderous organization a coincidence? Right after his first contact with Hitler? Von Braun later downplays this connection, saying,
I was there twice a week and took riding lessons. The entire outfit never participated in any activities outside the riding school during my connection with it. In the summer of 1934, I was discharged from the unit.
We can't know his thoughts, but his actions certainly don't suggest any resistance to the Nazis. What we do know is that von Braun wasn't pressured by his immediate social circle to get involved with the party. Aside from a close friend, Arthur Rudolph, who joins the Nazi Party in 1931, most of his friends were liberals with no fondness for the Nazis. Even his father, a nationalist, was never one of them. His political career was actually undermined by the regime. Only his younger brother Magnus, who would later work with Wernher on rocket development, joined the party in 1937 out of ideological conviction. But by that time, Wernher was already deeply involved with Hitler's twisted ideology and plans for world domination. That was no one-way road, however, and von Braun knew it. At any point, he could have chosen to stop working with the Nazis and aligned himself with the right side of history. Best examples? His colleagues. Nobel laureate Heinrich Weyland, for example, never collaborated with the regime and actively resisted by protecting Jewish students expelled under the 1935 Luxembourg laws, even risking his career to testify for anti-Nazi resistance members. Similarly, Max von Laue, another Nobel laureate in physics, openly opposed the appointment of Nazi sympathizers to leadership positions in scientific communities. An anecdote famously illustrates his resistance. He would carry parcels when leaving his house, cleverly avoiding the need to give the Nazi salute. But one might argue that these were established scholars who did not fear for their positions. There's also Wiley Ley. Ley was just a few years older than von Braun and the vice president of the Society for Space Travel. Despite his clear love for the subject, he chose to flee to the United States in 1935. Like many others who refused to stay and work with the Nazis, like Erwin Schrödinger, Hermann Weyl, and Lise Meitner, the first woman to become a full professor of physics in Germany. So von Braun clearly had alternatives. He just chose not to use them. When confronted later in the US about his Nazi connection, von Braun repeatedly insisted that he was driven only by his childhood dream, rocket development and space exploration. But his early collaboration with the Nazis suggests that there may have been more to it. Peenemünde is a top-secret military research center and one of the most notorious sites known in history. And this says a lot. In this remote area in northeast Germany, the Nazis will do their best to develop rockets for their war plans. And can you guess who proposed this place?
Where should we go?
Exactly, Wernher von Braun. In May 1937, Peenemünde finally opens its gates, and at just 25 years old, von Braun becomes its technical director. Initially, he oversees a team of 350, but soon that number grows into the thousands. But to be able to rise this high and higher, he first needs to really become a Nazi, not only act like one. On November 12, 1937, von Braun formally applies for membership in the party, dating his application back to May 1st, the day Peenemünde first opened. From now on, he is officially a Nazi. Von Braun initially focuses on his rocket projects, and by October 1938, the first rocket, the A5, successfully launches, reaching altitudes of 12 kilometers and a range of 18 kilometers. But the Nazis want more. Hitler himself visits Peenemünde on March 23, 1939, von Braun's 27th birthday. He isn't there to celebrate. Germany's gearing up for war, and Hitler's eager to ensure that everything's ready before launching an all-out assault on the war. His visit to the rocket center reflects his hope that this substantial investment will produce graspable results, but the lack of visible progress deeply worries him. Who are these people and what are they even good for? Maybe von Braun's place is fighting on the front, not just sitting around playing with their rocket toys. Von Braun and his team now start to understand if their rockets and their work have any value, they have to prove it on the battlefield, defeating Hitler's enemies. The second, much more direct sign that the Nazis are not there for science comes in the spring of 1940 when von Braun comes in contact with Heinrich Himmler, number 2 in the Nazi Party and the leader of the SS. Maybe this acquaintance reminded von Braun of his horse riding lessons back in his student days. Himmler has sent a messenger asking von Braun to join his paramilitary organization. He surely isn't the type of man who takes no for an answer. And on May 1st, 1940, von Braun officially becomes an SS officer. His hard work and success earn him annual promotions. By 1943, he holds the rank of Major, a position of significant esteem within the SS. His development of the A4 rocket, later known as the V2, is indeed a technological breakthrough. It's much more stable and easier to control than any rocket before, with an unbelievable range of 320 kilometers. The first successful launch on October 3rd, 1942, is a moment of excitement. But the rocket is still not ready for operational use. Its accuracy remains limited, making it unreliable for specific targets, like London. 2 more years are necessary for its full development. But Hitler doesn't have 2 years. After the catastrophic defeat in Stalingrad in February 1943, he desperately needs a wonder weapon to turn the tide of the